Does it do what it says on the tin? Many people outside medicine are quite surprised to hear that the practice of medicine that is based on scientific, experimental evidence of whether a treatment actually works or not is relatively new. The era of evidence-based medicine really only got started in the 1990s. Now we have national and international clinical guidelines. These are recommendations on the best way to diagnose and treat different health conditions, and those recommendations are based on evidence from lots of published studies and experimental trials. But that said, even today, lots of the things doctors do to patients are still not based on very good evidence, and even when they are, you might be even more surprised to learn that for some of the most commonly prescribed evidence-based medical treatments in the world today, those treatments don't actually work for most of the patients being treated. A study published in Nature in 2015 looked at the number of people who actually had a beneficial clinical response to the top 10 most prescribed drugs based on gross sales globally. For the number one top-selling drug, aripiprazole for schizophrenia, in only 1 in every 5 patients did the drug actually work. For the number 2 drug, esomeprazole for heartburn, the success rate is woeful. The drug was effective in only 1 in every 25 patients. For the number 3 drug, adalimumab for arthritis, 1 in 4 patients respond. And for the number 4 drug, rosuvastatin for high cholesterol, the drug works for 1 in 20 patients. All those patients taking those tablets religiously, day after day, continue to take these drugs whether they work or not. If our most commonly prescribed drugs don't do what they say on the tin most of the time, do medical devices fare any better? I'm afraid the answer is we have no idea really, because the evidence base for medical devices is very poor compared to drug treatments. When a new medical device gets a European CE mark, that doesn't mean that it's been convincingly shown to be clinically effective or even clinically safe. It just means that the device complies with some pretty basic essential requirements. The US regulators at the FDA tend to demand a bit more evidence than EU regulators, but not much more. For example, Medtronic developed a device called Guardwire, which sucks out clots from arteries during angioplasty and stenting procedures. Now, you'd think that regulators would demand a fairly high level of evidence that such a potentially hazardous device really does what it says on the tin, that it improves outcomes for patients and is very safe. In actual fact, CE mark approval for Guardwire was granted on the basis of one 22-patient study with no control group. In the US, the FDA demanded a bit more evidence, but still gave FDA approval on the basis of one 800-patient multi-centre randomised controlled trial. So the evidence base for drug treatments is strong, but some of our most popular drugs don't actually do what they say on the tin for the majority of people taking them. For medical devices, the situation is much worse, because until very recently, regulatory approval has not been based on strong evidence of clinical effectiveness. The question, does it do what it says on the tin, is rarely asked. So let me come now to AI health. Where does that leave AI software as a medical device? To paraphrase a line from the classic British sitcom Blackadder, clinical evaluation of a medical device is like a dog that speaks, rare. Clinical evaluation of AI software is like a dog that speaks Norwegian, exceedingly rare. Is this a problem for healthcare? Absolutely. The lack of evidence that AI health tech does what it says on the tin is a big, big problem for healthcare and for the AI health tech industry. Without clinical evidence of validity to persuade a naturally conservative and justifiably sceptical medical profession, first do no harm, says the Hippocratic Oath, they simply won't use AI technology that potentially could transform healthcare. But the problem is worse than that, because where there's no evidence, AI marketing hype goes into overdrive and expands to fill the vacuum, undermining what little trust the medical profession had in AI and wasting everybody's time and money. To try and fill the AI evidence gap in cancer care with clinical evidence instead of hype, cancer, we recently launched one of the first AI clinical evaluation programs for cancer. Our programme is a joint venture between Guy's Cancer and the King's Technology Evaluation Centre, KITEC for short, at King's College London. KITEC has over 9 years of experience in health technology evaluation. Together we combine the wealth of clinical and genomic data, clinical care and research expertise at Guy's Cancer with the academic evaluation and AI expertise of King's College London to create what we hope will be a world leader in AI clinical evaluation in cancer care. When we began our AI validation work at Guy's, we quickly realised that there was no national or even international consensus on how to evaluate AI in healthcare. We did, however, find that a number of organisations and institutions were starting to propose validation frameworks and evidence standards for AI health tech. The rest of them to create our own AI health tech validation framework. It's a work in progress that we're using it and testing it to evaluate if promising AI health tech products do what they say on the tin. We've developed 18 criteria of validity and a set of questions that need to be addressed to evidence that these criteria have been met at each stage of the AI product development life cycle, from product inception through to product development, assessment, routine implementation and routine monitoring. This slide shows the criteria and questions to be addressed even before the algorithm is developed. Is the AI technology relevant? What health question or problem is it trying to answer? Is the product likely to be acceptable to users and patients? Pretty obvious questions you would think, but you'd be amazed how infrequently those questions are asked. This slide shows some examples of criteria and questions to be addressed during the product's development. So taking scientific validity, is the data used to develop the AI model suitable to answer the clinical question, i.e. does it capture real-world heterogeneity of patients and is it of sufficient quality? Examples of criteria to be addressed once you start using the AI technology in the real-world setting, and this is where we're focusing our clinical evaluation at Guy's Cancer. Credibility and acceptability. Does the AI have credibility with health professionals and is it acceptable to users? Clinical validity. What evidence is there of real-world clinical effectiveness in the proposed clinical setting? Does it improve health outcomes for patients? Let me take you briefly through 2 case studies to show you how we're applying these validation criteria to AI products that we're evaluating at Guy's Cancer. So the first AI product has been developed by Page, a US company spun out of Memorial Sloan Kettering, one of the most prestigious cancer hospitals in the USA. They developed an AI tool called Page Lymph Node, or Page LN for short. It can read a digital pathology slide containing a biopsy from a cancer patient's lymph node. The AI has been trained to recognise breast cancer metastases in the node. That's whether cancerous cells have spread from the breast to the lymph node. The tool highlights for the pathologist, and you can see the coloured areas on the slide there, those cells on the slide that it thinks are cancerous. During the reporting phase, Page can help pathologists efficiently review slides, double check their findings and make sure that they don't miss any metastases. So let's apply some of the criteria and questions from our validation framework. Let's start with the product inception criterion relevance. How relevant is Page LN to supporting the breast cancer pathway at a tertiary UK cancer hospital like Guy's Cancer? Is it designed to address the clinical problem at Guy's and other UK cancer centres? Well, if I tell you that 55,000 patients are diagnosed with breast cancer in the UK every year, and that translates into 400 cases a year at Guy's and over 2,000 lymph node biopsies at Guy's alone, you can see immediately that our breast pathologists are overburdened and we don't have enough of them. And the NHS spends £27 million a year outsourcing pathologist services because of lack of capacity in the NHS, and the quality of those services is not always great. So I think the answer to the relevance question on Page is absolutely yes. So let's ask a product development criterion question about scientific validity. Is the data used to build the PAGE LN AI model suitable to answer the clinical question at Guy's, i.e. does it capture the real-world heterogeneity of our patients, and is it of sufficient detail and quality? Well, the PAGE LN algorithm was initially trained on a data set of over 5,000 lymph node slides from over 1,000 patients. The data set reflects diversity in terms of disease status and type of tissue specimen. The slides originated from Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Hospital in New York, where subspecialist expert pathologists reviewed every case. The algorithm was then evaluated on a separate external data set of over 1,300 slides from over 400 patients obtained from multiple institutions across multiple countries. And the initial results show high accuracy and very fast performance. It can review slides in seconds. So we felt that PAGE passed our scientific validity question. So let me move on to another AI product called Prostate AI Cancer Decision Support, or prostate DS for short. Prostate is developed by a UK-based startup called Deontics, a spin-out of Oxford University. And prostate DS is interesting because it uses old-fashioned expert system AI. It doesn't use machine learning. Shots of the early prototype that we're currently evaluating at Guy's shows what it does. It automatically pulls in key clinical variables from the electronic patient record of a prostate cancer patient. These are the data items on the left-hand side. Variables like the PSA score, which some of you might be familiar with. Then it checks these against internationally recognised clinical guidelines for prostate cancer treatment, or our own local Guy's protocols. And down the right-hand side here, you can see European guidelines, NICE guidelines, and the local protocol. The tool then recommends the best treatment for that individual patient according to the different guidelines. Down to see what the rationale is for the recommendation, and you can even drill right down specific text in the original guideline document itself. So let's ask those two AI validation criteria questions again of prostate DS. First, how relevant is this AI tool to supporting our prostate cancer pathway? Well, at the moment in the UK, every cancer patient must be referred to a multidisciplinary team meeting for a treatment recommendation. These MDTs, as they're called, can have as many as 20 experts or more around the table. They can last 3 hours at a time, and there are far too many patients now being referred and not enough time to discuss them properly. At our prostate MDTs, at Guy's, we estimate possibly up to 40% or more of our patients have less complex disease, and our hypothesis is that if prostate DS can make clinical recommendations that are as good as our MDT, then if appropriately supervised, it could be used to triage those patients straight to the referring doctor, leaving the MDT more time to discuss the really complex patients. So we believe that prostate DS is highly relevant. Now let's ask that scientific validity question. Because prostate DS doesn't use machine learning, we've asked a slightly different question, which is, has prostate DS been shown to make valid recommendations with a real-world heterogeneous sample of patients similar to our patients at Guy's? And the answer is no, because it has never been used with prostate cancer patients before. And we've partnered with Deontics and Somerset Cancer Registry, the company who provide our cancer patient record system and provide a cancer record system for over 80% of cancer hospitals in the UK. And we've partnered also with with King's College Hospital and with Prostate Cancer UK. And the 2-year study is funded by NHSX and the National Institute for Health Research. So I hope I've been able to provide you a flavour of how it's possible to get beyond the hype of AI in healthcare and start to answer the crucial question, does it do what it says on the tin? It's not easy to answer, and the way to answer it may be different compared with other medical devices, but if we can build an evidence base for AI in healthcare, and especially in cancer care, we really can transform patient care for the better.